AJ Meyers here. I'm with Elasticsearch, and I'm a principal solutions architect. So I've been about the past 35 years of my career just working with all forms of data, and as you can imagine, in a lot of different ways on how you can work with it. The one thing that I've seen is kind of like the full circle is the move from going from highly denormalized data for things that can work at high volumes but just get everything on the record, to the relational advent, to we're coming back to full circle now with AI because you need to have more data on hand in order to do what you need. So what I want to talk about is that a lot of the things you hear about like SaaS apocalypse and all the other stuff is people are trying to figure out what is it that you can do with your data? What is the agentic things? I'm going to try to use a little less of the AI talk and more about the agentic elements. The reason why I'm differentiating that is that I want to be able to think about as you build your own agents for different purposes, you're going to need to have some levels of things that are familiar with and some of the new concepts and how you can blend the two in order to really accelerate what you're going to do and what you want to use this for. But one of the things I want to really focus on is that you have a lot of data and everybody has different levels of data. And one of the things that I've heard from different folks in different areas, some folks say my data's great, other folks everything's perfect, others are saying we're a mess. Got every spectrum in between. The one thing that the whole agentic front is taking care of, or really challenging, is what data are you really talking about, and what data do you now need in order to make a difference to really advance your company in a different way? Use the data that's yours and yours alone, which is your moat. Things around your change logs, your policies, your procedures. How do you do business? What makes your company differentiated from other companies? That knowledge has been historically created for people. So you got things on SharePoint drives. You create version 1, version 2, version 3 of a PowerPoint deck while you ideate and build something out. Look at this, for example. That's one of the reasons why I had my own laptop and trying to do this, because I was still making a few tweaks as we go along here. But the one thing that we want to make sure is, once you have that identified, how do you organize it? How do you prepare it? And how can you easily get it ingested in a way that you can really make it relevant, that you can trust that what you're pulling together is actually usable and consumable and is going to fit the purpose, and it's also accessible across the whole spectrum. So however you wish to make that agent work for you. Now, the other reason why I'm kind of differentiating AI from the agentic part of it is that you're an agent. The way I'm going to define it, everyone has their own definitions, is that you have your logic layer, you have a data layer, and you also have your reasoning layer. So that AI everybody's talking about, I think about it from a reasoning layer, and the way I'm breaking it down that way is when we build software, historically, we think in tiers. We think in ways of separation and ways of being able to protect and separate the work and the responsibilities to different areas of software or databases or whatever in order to get the best results. Now, when we think of it that way, we want to be able to move through and work with how can we use agents and that reasoning layer, not only just to help with building out your end product, so whatever you want that agent to do, that data product, however you package that up in order to do that level of work for your audience, the best work for you. We use at Elasticsearch. Let me just ask, I kind of assume that people know what Elasticsearch is, but one of the biggest questions I get at the booth is, what is Elasticsearch? Anybody know what Elasticsearch is? See, I'm glad I asked it that way versus the other way. How many people have used OpenSearch? Okay, we got about the same number. Basically, it's all about finding your data. If you have looked for a car, like an Uber, or looked for the weather, or used any sort of other reasoning, chances are, like any sort of app on your phone, chances are at some point in time during the course of today, you might be used Elasticsearch 4 or 5 times without even realizing it. We're like the original gangster for search. We have our company founded, and a lot of other products have built their products based upon Elasticsearch as an embedded element, or have copied it and used elements like this. But like all companies, we use open source elements, and one of them is Lucene. So we're the main contributors and the custodian of the Lucene project. And so that's been around since 2001. Elasticsearch has actually been something since 2015. And in that period of time, your phone has become a lot more valuable because companies have found a better way on being able to access unstructured data. And unstructured data has been now so extended to be any kind of structure of data, whether that's machine level data, vectors, geospatial coordinates, logs, security events. That can all be managed in the same type of way and all managed through our product like this. So chances are your endpoint, your home and your offices might be protected with our security product, or your operations are being monitored by our observability product. All are based upon the same foundation of how do you get at that data you need. Now, extending that concept to what we want to talk about today is how can you really start to pull in your things like your GitHub repos, your SharePoint documents that are just piled up and just waiting to be used, or network drive information. How can you make that agentic and AI ready? You know, we had some great metrics that were showing up a little bit earlier about how many companies are not going to approve products unless you know your data is agentic, agentically accessible. How can you make sure it's reasonable? You can trust it. It's the right version. Do you know you have the most current element? What are those things that you really want to focus on to make sure that that level is there, and more importantly, you can test it, you can measure it, you can make it repeatable, and you can establish that level of trust so that whatever you're going to deliver to that agent, you know what at least that level is going to be performant, it's going to be trusted, and you know what it's going to give. You may not trust what the agent might come back with, but at least you can measure up to that state. So just to throw up another statistic here, is that of all of the other statistics you saw earlier today, is that 70% is like that average number that's been tossed around. We can give you the references on that if you like. Just stop by the booth and ask any questions that you like on that. But the basic element is 70% of these agentic efforts fail primarily because you don't always have that data organized to go into your LLM. You can never have that predictable result in order to make sure that when you go to your management to get that approval or that funding, you trust that you're always going to be right coming out of the gate. You know, we talked earlier about that level of risk that AI and your agents are going to provide. You have to find as many different layers in that application stack of whatever you're building those agents for to be as predictable and routine as possible, so that when that agent is released to that right audience, and if that audience is the public or the financial analysts or whatever that case may be, you know that you have as much of that not only just predictable and tested, but I can measure every step along its operations as well. So one thing that why I transitioned to this is that in order to get to that step of measurability, a lot of the things that we're still too comfortable with and evolving towards, and I was trying to tweak the title here a little bit, is that blind spots so far, is that we're still working in a common things that we're used to working with. A lot of the architectural reviews are dealing with what used to be their quantifiable world about code and architecture and things you can touch and the processes and such. But we need to expand that window because an architectural review needs some more things that were a little less hard and used to be a little bit more fluffy or contextual. Now you have to be able to know what it is retrieving, under what conditions, what is that context, how can you measure that context for the question? How fresh is that knowledge? How can you measure and determine that currency of the data that's always being pulled back is being delivered to your agent at the right time and at the right frequency and the right freshness? And the other part we've talked about it in a few places today, is that access. The permissions to your data. Not everybody can see the same thing for your role. And how can you make sure your agent doesn't see it before your role level is being applied? Once it's in the agent, it's there. It can be used, it can be leveraged, it can be shared. You want to make sure that your permissions, excuse me, your ability to see that data for your question and that agent's actions is appropriate before it even goes anywhere else. Now, the things around I've been touching about this is that a lot of these things are no longer optional. You want to be able to embed these practices early and as part of your architectural and your development process, and be able to have those tools and processes in place and using your own level of agents, because agents are now, they're already permeated throughout the stack. I mean, they're in products, they're in data, they're in, you name the level. They're not just at that top level. So separating out how you use them and where is also important when you're talking about building and explaining it to your management teams. But being able to make sure to address the staleness. It's really important if you're dealing with any sort of regulations and like GDPR and such. Can you control it? Can you have the right to forget? If you embed and train your models constantly with customer behaviors and customer activities, you can't make the model unlearn something. You have to step back, reset, and then retrain again from the point forward. How can you put those levels of controls, whether you're having things that have to work with different cultures or in different government bodies, regulatory, HIPAA, I mean, you name it. You got to have some levels of controls and protections at that data layer, regardless of whatever tools you have under the covers. That's a given, and that's table stakes anymore. And then when they fail, the need for being able to instrument, being able to have that visibility on every stack along the way. How do you know what you're working with on your elements that you control? But a lot of agents, many folks, you can't afford to host your own data center to run your own AI agents or your own LLMs. Most people have a service. Almost everybody by now has more than one agent for different purposes, right? No one agent can solve every problem or answer every question the same way, in a relevant way. You have to have many agents. Some may be in-house. Some may be specialized and tuned and tweaked for your specific need. Others may be more generalized, but you have to be able to switch. And they will change. Pick a week. What's the leaderboard on Hugging Face? I don't know. I can't keep up. I just have to go look at it today. So the rate of change is just crazy. I mean, even just where we're at today with search, the whole thing with Elasticsearch, we were focusing on how do I find things in a document or find things on your website the best way. You had keyword search, you had fuzzy matching, you had things that were programmatic. You have a different search language for different purposes. There was a lot of different tools out there and a lot of different languages to go with each one, and the website developers, they have to know them all. Things are simplifying. People want to ask simple English language or a language, pick a language, questions to your agent and have it translated to the context of which the data is there and come back in the language of which you're working with. That's more important than ever. Measuring that effectiveness and measuring some of the intangible parts. What does relevance mean? How can you say that something is relevant? How can you score that? How can you re-rank your answers to make sure that you're not getting a book of answers, you're getting the short list or that one or two things that are really what you're trying to get after. The other part that we're talking about, like everybody in every department is building an agent for something, experimenting or at any level. Whether it's I want an agent that's going to help my DBAs field questions to take care of those that first line of triage before it has to actually land in my DBA's lap and take some of the burden off their hands, or I want to build something that's actually going to generate revenue. But you want to be able to have things that are going to go after the data you want. But when you build an agent, sometimes you kind of open the floodgates before you know how to close them. Agents don't care where the data lives at. It's going to try to find the data wherever it can get it. It's not going to respect your organizational boundaries when you want it to, and it will overly respect them when you don't expect it to. You have to make that more predictable, make that data that's shareable across departments, what's common, and normalize things that are shared. Like how many people have companies where you deal with customer? You know, somewhere in your database there's a customer, right? How many different definitions do you have of customer in your company? And how long have you been able to make people agree on what that definition is? I mean, one of the things that I've worked on for years is the most frustrating topic you can ever work in is building enterprise data models. So you build an enterprise data model. As a consultant, I would come in, one group would say, I want this enterprise data model that I can base everything on for my company. You come in, you offer the data model that takes in, you interview all these different departments. You know how many got implemented? None. Except by the company that paid for it. Now with agentic purposes, the semantic consistency is more important than ever. Knowing that when you ask a question, whether you're in one department or another, you're going to get the same type of answer about the same context. Building that consistency, pushing that envelope is going to be more important than ever. If anybody needs proof of that, look at the security industry right now, like your whole SIMs and information security. The only way that has been as successful and is growing and accelerating as fast as it is because a lot of each vendor, us included, are standardizing on a data schema, like that ontology. What do you call the data, regardless of what source it comes from, in order to know how to say, I want a repeatable rule that's going to detect an attack from 7 different vectors and 13 different sources, but I'm going to normalize that data and have a common definition about what it means. That's critical now with agentic more than ever. That has to be expanded and bridge those barriers that we normally would have, whether we want to keep our own little moat to define our department, or that's specific to our industry, or like in healthcare. There's always good reason to have different definitions. But how can you bridge that gap and make sure that those ontologies and schemas are normalized where you can make that usable? So this is more like that observability example. Like when someone has an issue with an application, the first thing a lot of developers will do is go look at log lines. All right, and then you got to go look at the logs of the infrastructure. Then you can't find the answer. You get on the phone with 15 different people for 2 or 3 hours, and the first thing everybody says, it's not my area, my part works great. You spent the next couple hours peeling back that layer of onion, and trying to find what is that problem. Now, what if this thing, let's just call it a retrieval layer, whatever that face may be. We've seen a couple examples. Like IBM's got a great picture. We have something as well where for today, I'm just calling it the retrieval layer. That retrieval layer has got to have intelligence. That retrieval layer has got to be fast. That retrieval layer has to have security to make sure the person who's asking the question through that layer is not getting at data they shouldn't be getting at, right? And it also has to know how to go after things that are most relevant and the most timely and the accurate one. So instead of going through 14 million log lines, 600 run books, you can come back and say, I now have, what are the specific logs that are correlated by the event and by the context of the application, the infrastructure it's running on, and other factors in the identity of the individuals? What are the additional anomalies that you can measure on what is different in the patterns of the data beforehand, as well as what is that one run book that's related to this issue? Oh yeah, and by the way, what are all the outstanding issues, and when was the last change point on a release when that was put out? You want to give that as intelligence to your agent in order to come back with an answer on what is the problem. So that reasoning layer can then work with a lot more information, not just data, but information in order to really come to an answer quickly for you. So, does that example make sense? Sound great. So this thing's about what you're hearing a lot about today, and what you're going to continue to hear about as the sessions and the conferences go on, is that there is a lot of talk about trust. There's a lot of talk about that data layer and the trust in your data and being able to put the tools together. I mean, we're all, each of us are putting our own perspective of how we perceive the elephant in the room. The things to take away from my perspective is, as we work together to normalize our definitions and our concepts to make sense of how we're going to attack it in our own organization, we want to be able to pull these elements and make sure that those infrastructure elements are available. So being able to say, how can you go after this information? How can you make sure this is in place? How can I make sure that this is going to be extensible to new concepts? I'll be talking a little later today, and which I'll be better prepared for that slide as the next round. But we'll talk about other things that are emerging threats that you want to be able to start to think about today, because a lot of the stuff I had in this deck, I had to test it every week for the past 4 weeks and revise it 3 times in order to make sure it was current. The rate of change is that fast, and it's unbelievable where it's at today. So building that bridge, that retrieval layer, is going to be your element in order to make sure that you'll be able to have a pattern and a framework that's going to be able to prepare that data from being consumable, not just for people, but for yourself and for machines, for agents, deliver that natural language approach, gather intelligence, and deliver information and insights to the agent so it can help determine things quickly for you. And build this right and build it today. All these things are actually available today. So with that, I think I spent more time on setup than I did anything else, but hopefully this will answer any questions. We have a booth over here around the corner. Please stop by and be glad to answer any other questions that you may have on things. And I think I'm the last stop before we have a break.
All right, thank you.